Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us again for this episode. And I wanted to start out and just say a big, huge thank you. There's some great people who've really helped out. I'm doing some work up in Vacaville, California, and it's an underserved community where people are really struggling financially and health-wise. We're seeing an epidemic of diabetes and health problems that are devastating, right? So, when I saw their break room up at this company, Vacaville Fruit Company, a little shout out to them because they care about their employees and they're helping. I'm not sponsored by them, but I'm consulting with them right now, trying to help out. I felt overwhelmed, and so I looked at their break room, and and I couldn't believe it. Everything was garbage food. So these people who work hard all day and are sleep deprived and stressed, they're not getting good nutrition. So people are calling in sick. You start having other health problems, losing people to diabetes complications. And so the owner of the company reached out to me and said, hey, I don't care what it costs. I want to help these people. They got them continuous glucose monitors. They paid for labs and for them to go through my program. And, I reached out to some people in the community and said, hey, can we help? Because it takes a community. So who responded? Health Code. Dr. Ben Bickman, who is a hero of mine, said, hey, well, how can I help? I can lecture, I can come and do whatever, let's get them some product and see what they can do. So Health Code Shakes helped out. Rosette's, who's the wife of my partner on the Low Carb MD podcast, she said, let me send some snack, low carb snacks, cake mix where they could celebrate birthdays and have cookies and things like that. And of course, my sponsor here is Simply Snacking. Very proud. She sent them a ton of samples, and I'm seeing their continuous glucose monitors staying flat. And I'm seeing sugars go from 246 down to less than 100 consistently. And so I just wanted to give a shout out. I'm only sponsored by Simply Snacking, but everyone else jumped in to help. Ben Bakikio, 15 Minutes to Fitness, he jumped in and said, hey, I'll lecture them on exercise. I really want to help. So what I'm saying is all these great people are coming out of the woodwork and wanting to help a community. And that's what it's going to take. We have to invest in other people. And that's what this podcast is about. And I feel very passionate about that, and I'm proud of these companies. And I want you to support these companies because they're giving, they're helping, they're like-minded. Sue at Simply Snack and I talked to her and said, look, this is a small podcast. We're just getting it off the ground. It's going to be a net loss for you probably for a while, right? And she says, I believe in your cause. I believe in helping people. And so when you're combined with people like this, you can't fail. So I just want to give a shout out to those companies. They didn't do it for me to talk on the podcast. No one even mentioned it. They said, how can I help? And I think if more of us are like that, we're going to be successful. We're going to do better and we're going to help more people. So thank you for listening. And thank you for your continued support. Hello and welcome to the Life's Best Medicine and hopefully Low Carb MD. We have a repeat guy for Low Carb MD, episode number 83. One of my favorites. I really love his approach and his story. He has a new book coming out. So we did this pretty much impromptu. We said, let's do this tomorrow. So here we go. We're here today doing it. Dr. Kevin Gendreau. You
Hello.
Probably pronounce it differently the fancy way, right?
No, I say Dr. Gendro.
Gendro. All right,
totally fine either way.
So, you've done a lot, family medicine trained. I know you went to Temple, right? Temple and then Tufts. So you know your stuff, right. Family medicine and, struggle with obesity. Tell people your story. I think and you have a new book out that I'm really excited about getting to my patients to help in this fight that we're up against. So tell people your story in a nutshell. I know episode number 83, Low Carb MD, you can go and hear details of this because I think it's important. But, tell us your journey where you got to where you are now, how you started making changes in your life and that now you're leading other people to freedom, I think.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. By the way, it's such an honor and I'm just so excited. And the first time that I was on Low Carb MD, it was just with Tro, which is like amazing. But that's just, he was available and you weren't. So it's really great to have the other half now.
Yeah,
so,
I know. I was jealous. I was like, dang it. I know I was out of town. I was like, shoot, I wanted to be there and So I'm glad that we had this opportunity again. So I didn't miss. It's like you're the big fish that got away, and I finally got to reel you back in. So really glad to have you here.
Not so much of a big fish anymore. I'm like a medium-sized
Yeah,
fish
you're a
now.
small fish now. Yeah, I'll have to give you that.
So whenever I talk about, my own personal weight loss journey, I like to start with like how I gained all the weight to begin with, because that's such a huge component of people's journeys that I think is kind of minimized. Like people don't tend to reflect on how it all came on. And so for me personally, it was, I had a super active childhood. I loved to hike. I loved to go on nature walks. I was always outside, always active. I was involved in martial arts with my father. And so I never dealt with like a weight problem as a kid. From like 0 to 17, I was pretty fit, always active, never had a problem, and actually had a pretty good relationship with food. I had a Portuguese American upbringing, and grew up down the street from like a Portuguese bakery, and Portuguese food is pretty heavy in carbs and starches and baked goods, but never really had a bad relationship with food. And I ate lots of fruits and vegetables, didn't really have much juice or chocolate milk or anything like that. So I was a pretty active kid. And around, I was 17 years old when my father was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic melanoma. And it was just as I was starting college at Boston University, and it affected me in such a horribly negative way that, I never sought therapy with a grief counselor and didn't really find any way to cope with his illness other than food. So, he underwent chemotherapy, he underwent radiation, he had stem cell transplants, surgeries. It was basically just like intervention after intervention. And honestly, every time we got news, it was negative. And so I started turning to food in order to cope with my negative emotions. So instead of the freshman 15, it was really more like the freshman 50. And from the beginning of college to the end of college, I put on about 50 pounds of excess weight. So I went from like 180 to 230, and I'm about 5'9". So 180 was pretty close to being, the normal range for my height. And then by the time I got up to 230 pounds at the end of college, I was certainly considered obese. And my father did ultimately pass away when I was 19 years old, still in college, starting pre-med. I double majored in biology, pre-med, and also classical studies. So I was doing like Greek and Roman history and Latin, just a typical overachiever, pre-med overachiever. And then, I went on to medical school, and it's extremely difficult in medical school. No matter how smart you are, it's a very rigorous course load. And so I ended up packing on even more weight. I think it was another 50 pounds or so by the end of medical school. Went into family medicine because I really wanted to help people in a longitudinal kind of way. I really like preventative medicine. And so I went to my family medicine residency in Boston at Tufts. And at that point, I had ballooned up to 306 pounds, was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, obstructive sleep apnea, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, fatty liver disease, plantar fasciitis, depression. A doctor told me I had binge eating disorder, even though I didn't really know what that was. So yeah, I was an extremely unhealthy
Wow.
doctor.
And
I
that's
was
like a
actually,
stamp, right? That's a stamp. Like those, like when you started talking, I was thinking of the next diagnosis you were going to say, and you said it, and the next diagnosis you're going to say. And that's so many people don't realize all these things are interrelated to metabolic health. And that's why it's
yeah,
so
it's that
important what we're
metabolic
talking about.
syndrome, you know, it's basically all of the things that we expect with morbid obesity, honestly. So that's what ended up happening. I was around 306 pounds, and I had all of those comorbid conditions, and I would avoid the doctor because I really didn't want to go and hear about all the things that were wrong with me. And at the same time, I was practicing medicine, working 60, 70, 80 hours a week as a resident physician, and doling out medical advice to people, many of whom were overweight and had weight to lose, but they looked at me like, okay, doctor, when are you going to practice what you preach?
Yeah, and I think we have both experienced it. I've had that where, yeah, my heaviest, like 60 pounds ago, was like, Doc, what do I do to lose weight? I was like, well, heck, if I knew, I'd be doing it, because clearly I'm working out 6 days a week and I'm eating 6 meals a day that are small, and I'm doing the ADA's diet. I'm gaining weight. I'm getting pre-diabetic now also. And so it's frustrating because you want to give the right advice, and people are still coming to us. They can look at us and say, hey, they're not healthy, but they still must know better than I do. right?
Right. It's like you can actually have the knowledge, but not implement it because you know it's a lot of work. And what you really want, especially if you don't have a lot of time, is some kind of magic pill to like fix everything for you and reverse all of these things that you've been diagnosed with. And so there's a lot of denial that happens. Like you just don't even believe it's real. And since, you do have some symptoms, like I felt fatigued all the time and I had kind of like foggy thoughts, and I was definitely like sluggish when it comes to like mentally and also physically working all those hours. I just like chalked it up to being tired all the time. But it had more to do with like my blood sugar than anything else. So ultimately what happened was my sister unfortunately was diagnosed with terminal cancer herself, and she was 31 years old at the time, and she was diagnosed with a rare form of ovarian cancer. It was a germ cell tumor, and she underwent multiple surgeries, multiple bouts of radiation, stem cell transplants, chemotherapy. It was a very parallel experience to my father's, in that she, every time we got news about her, it was negative. And it was, like we were scared to get an update from the doctors. We were scared to get imaging done and find out that the tumors had spread further. And so when things started to look bleak, she's, a 32-year-old mother of two young children, my niece and nephew. When things started to not look so good, I really decided to choose differently. And so I looked at her life and looked at her choices, and I saw that, she was kind of just dealt this hand of cards, and it was no choice of her own. But yet I, every day, was choosing to put these super addictive, super unhealthy foods in my mouth. And so I just woke up one day, it was August of 2016, and decided to choose differently. And, threw out every bit of processed food in my house and committed to a low carb diet, and later added intermittent fasting after reading The Obesity Code by the famous Dr. Jason Fung. And yeah, I lost 125 pounds in 18 months. Most of that was lost while she was sick. She ultimately passed away in 2017. And so I got board certified in obesity medicine last year in 2020, and have just recently transitioned to full-time weight loss medicine from primary care. So that's
Wow,
kind of my story in a nutshell.
yeah, that's amazing. And your story, it brings so many things to light, right? It's not about the education necessarily, because we could tell people all day long, look, smoking's bad for you. Look, and here's the statistics and all this stuff. But when you're addicted to something, it makes it so much more difficult. And that's where our compassion and understanding and learning really comes in, because a lot of people say, well, just tell me a diet plan, let me do it. But there's so much of the emotional aspect. You went through a lot of trauma, a lot of stress, losing your dad at a young age, losing your sister at a young age. And so it's just so, we turn to that for comfort. And when things go hard in life, that's what we find. And I think there's a mindset with weight loss too, where people say, okay, as soon as I lose that 40 pounds for the wedding, I can go back and do what I was doing. But that's what got you to where you are. And I think that mindset is so dangerous for us. Instead of saying, okay, this is a life path. And so the people who I see personally in my practice doing more, medical weight loss, metabolic health stuff, is the people go, look, this is my lifestyle. I'm not going to sprint. I might have a cookie every once in a while, and then I'm going to get back on track the next day. And they seem to do great because they're looking at the long term. They go, if it takes longer, fine. If it takes me 6 weeks instead of 2 weeks, or 6 months or 6 years, whatever it is, I'm willing to invest in that because I believe in the process.
Yes, I think it's that shift from like a crash diet to more like I need to change my entire lifestyle. And I often frame it as, how carb tolerant or how carb intolerant are you? And there's always going to be these skinny people out there who could eat a dozen donuts a day and like an entire pizza and down it with a 2-liter bottle of Coke, and they just won't put on a pound. And then there's other people who look at a cookie the wrong way, like myself, and I swear to God, it gets immediately deposited on my waist.
Yeah,
So
we're the same. I mean, I have to be really, really strict. I can gain weight very, very quickly, having a couple of glasses of wine here and there, whatever it is. And so I think when you start realizing that, say, is life fair? It's not, because I know there's people that I look, as a matter of fact, just yesterday, I had a patient that she's 290 pounds. Her insulin's normal, metabolically, everything's healthy. She can continue to just get more obese and more obese, and at least be metabolically not really sick, but the stress on her joints and back and emotional, not being able to fit in places and those things. So health is a critical. And I also see people that are relatively thin that are really metabolically sick. And I say, oh,
Right,
we got
right,
to be
yeah.
really right. And it's always a shock to
Both of those
people.
situations are so surprising.
Yeah, they're both surprising, but we see it, and it's not. Some people, it's really important. That's why it's really important to get a good workup and get the labs. But you and I talked about a little bit beforehand is the emotional aspect of this whole thing and being able to, like, I just gave a talk and say, okay, the first three rules are being patient, and then being patient, then being patient, and then persevering, right? Because that's what it comes down to. It's like people want to have 30 pounds weight loss in a week, and they're frustrated when they go, I only lost 4 pounds. Like, you know how much 4 pounds is of fat? That's a lot. So like, give yourself credit. And there's a lot, and I would love to talk to you about these topics. I was so excited to have you on because this thing of self-compassion where give yourself a break. Like, people, I lost 2 pounds, and they're mad at. They go, look, you did everything great. You passed up cookies. You did so many good things this week. Let's look at that and focus on it.
I know a couple of days ago, I had a day of all follow-ups. I think I met like one new patient, and pretty much the whole day was follow-ups. And it was, we do like a 6-week schedule for most patients if we can bring them back at that frequency. And it was just like 11 pounds, 12 pounds, 20 pounds, 6 pounds. Everyone was losing crazy amounts of weight, but it seemed like almost every single patient over the 6 weeks was disappointed in themselves in some way. Even the people who lost 18 or 20 pounds in 6 weeks were like mad at themselves because it wasn't more. And I'm like, first of all, you have to love yourself. You have to learn how to forgive yourself if you screw up, because even though you did mess up a little bit in 6 weeks, you still are, net negative 12 pounds or 18 pounds. So you've come so far. And I think people are very hard on themselves. And I don't know if that's, built up over time of being bigger. They've learned how to hate themselves and learn how to not accept themselves. And they've learned to not forgive themselves when something goes wrong in a diet. And so they have this just like very negative outlook and negative spin on their own weight loss journey. So I feel like half of my job, or maybe even more than half of my job, is a mental health counselor. It's like I'm
Absolutely.
a psychiatrist and a psychologist and a mental health advocate. And I like to be like, it's almost like I'm a coach for my patients, like a life coach, like trying to teach them, like, it's okay to make a mistake. Like, you got to work on loving yourself. You got to work on forgiving yourself. And sometimes I feel like I'm just like a cheerleader, like cheering them on, because they really do so well. And even just a month of maintenance sometimes, or a month where you only lose a pound, is still huge progress when you're so used to losing nothing or gaining over a month.
Especially when everyone else is gaining 20 or 30 pounds during COVID, right? These lockdowns really affected people emotionally, physically, everything. And so their comfort became their sugary cereals from Saturday morning cartoons, right? All those things that we associate, these associations are so powerful. And that's why I'm so excited about what you're doing, is being able to identify and go, look, I was there. I know how it is. And because everyone thinks, and this is the trouble you and I run into, is a lot of docs have been thin their whole life. They've made good choices. Maybe they're metabolically healthy. They never let themselves get metabolically sick. So they say, well, everyone just do what I did and it'll be easy. But because they never had to struggle. They go, just here's the diet plan. Here's the standard ADA diet plan, without saying, hey, look, you're having different struggles than I did, maybe, because the doctors unfortunately think that everyone's lying to them. And I know you probably thought the same thing.
Yeah, no, I just think a lot of doctors have this outlook of, it's unfortunate, but it's true. It's a simplistic, like, calories in, calories out. Like, you just simply need to lower your caloric intake and you will lose weight. And I think that's like the mark of a doctor that's clearly never struggled with weight themselves. Because if they had struggled, they probably wouldn't say, oh, you just have to eat less calories and you'll be
We've
okay.
all done it. We've exercised more. We've eaten less, and I think it's knowing what to eat, and really understanding metabolic health. I think when we really kind of step back, we say, okay, metabolic health is a key. Getting that insulin under control, there's insulin resistance, and so it's simplistic to think it's just calories in, calories out. Now I think low carb is the best tool, as you talked about, and I loved it on Low Carb MD when you talked about that, because this is my approach also. Okay, let's just get rid of the processed stuff first. Okay, can we give up soda? Can we give up this cookies that you have every day? Whatever. And then over time, people naturally gravitate towards this time restricted eating, intermittent fasting. Then they can do a little bit of little bit longer fast, like 36 hours or 48 hours, something like that. But it's
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 like
a
you read my book already, because
I
that's
know already,
honestly
right?
exactly
See, I've already read it and I haven't had
that's
it yet. I can't wait to
exactly what
read
I
it.
did.
Yeah, and we're going to plug that because I think it's important, because I'm going to have it here for my patients, because we need more tools, and it's going to reach people. But I think, being able to say, okay, you're going to run a marathon tomorrow. Okay, that's overwhelming. People just give up. And I think we overcomplicate things and we demand so much. And, one of the other points I wanted to make is that most of the people who struggle are the caregivers, people who care for everyone else, but they don't have time for themselves.
Right, right. They never prioritize themselves. Honestly, most of my patients, they're like women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who have spent a lifetime of not putting themselves first. That's like my average patient. So I have to teach them that self-care is okay, especially as they're going, 40, 50, 60s, like they're heading into from their middle age to their older years, and they're going to be retiring soon. And like, you need to be in better health for those years, or you're just going to be miserable and sad and home all the time. You're not going to be able to enjoy any of your retirement. And so it's so important for them to start at least giving, a little bit of a care about themselves. So it's just interesting that you said that about the first step that you take with patients is giving up processed food, because I didn't go into this whole weight loss journey thinking, I'm going to have a specific number of carbs per day that I'm going to eat. I just went through my kitchen and removed everything that was highly processed, and it happened to all be sugar and carbohydrates. And then I immediately filled 3 trash bags with that garbage and went to the grocery store and stayed on the periphery and got all fresh fruits, vegetables, frozen meats, fish, all of the proteins and veggies that we tell people are the best foods to eat. And I started eating clean. And when I was calculating my carbs, I happened to have been eating 300 grams of the standard American diet, like cereal, waffles, and pancakes for breakfast, and sandwiches for lunch, and potatoes and bread for dinner. And it was about 300 to 400 grams of carbs per day on average. And then when I switched to a cleaner diet with mostly, fruits, vegetables, nuts, meats, and fish, I was eating 60 or so grams of carbs per day. And that was without even really purposely counting or restricting carbohydrates. It was just cleaning up my diet happened to lower my carbs, and getting rid of chocolate milk and juices and sodas and things like that meant that my carb count, plummeted to 60 grams or less most days. And then the weight started melting off. And so I used MyFitnessPal as the primary tool to lose weight at first. And that was to track I was kind of tracking everything. I was tracking the protein and the fat content and the carbs, and I was counting my calories, and I was, tracking my weight with MyFitnessPal as well, which was a super useful tool. I actually still use it to track my weight because I like to see over time what the trend looks like. And then eventually, when I was around, I went from 306 to 230 pounds. And that was around when my sister passed away. She was able to see me and my brother-in-law actually lose quite a substantial amount of weight before she passed. And then everything kind of plateaued because I got into this, kind of depression again, and it was survival mode watching your sister die. And so I got off track a bit and kind of stabilized around 230 pounds. And then I decided to, after reading the Obesity Code by Jason Fung, I decided to start intermittent fasting and a low carb diet defined by specifically less than 40 grams of carbs a day. And I used that to go from 230 down to 181.
Yeah, that's amazing. And your journey. One thing that I wanted to ask you when you were talking about was, when you threw all that food away, what was your mindset when you had to throw away all this food that you loved or that you enjoyed? Were you just done, or was it an emotional hard thing? Because that's a hard thing for us overweight people to throw away food, not to eat everything and throw it away because it's so ingrained into our brain.
Right. No, so I had tried dieting a few times over the years, when I was 250, 275, when I approached 300, I tried to diet a little bit, but I didn't really know what to do because they didn't really teach you that stuff in medical school. And you kind of think that it's calorie restriction and not, specifically carb restriction or intermittent fasting or any of that other stuff. So I didn't really know what to do. And I tried Weight Watchers and actually gained weight. And so it was a long time coming, me throwing out all that food. And I remember being in this very black and white state of mind where it was if anything was even remotely processed, I was getting rid of it. And by the end of it, 3 trash bags full later, I mean, half the food was probably expired anyway, but three trash bags full later, I was exhausted and just like over it. And I had nothing left in the house, honestly. Pretty much everything was processed, everything had sugar. There was nothing fresh. Like I had no fresh fruits or vegetables. I had no meats that would be acceptable. Like the only meats that I had were like, you know, breaded chicken tenders in the freezer. It was like, it was bad. So I was eating all processed food. I was eating, honestly, the standard American diet was what I was eating. But that's
Yeah.
what I consider like the standard American diet. It's what they want you to eat, kind of.
Yeah, and my frustration at the time when I was really at my heaviest, I was having green shakes every morning. I was causing insulin resistance. Having whole wheat toast for my sandwich, and I was having non-fat pretzels, and I was having all these carbs, and I realized, oh, I'm insulin. When I, like you, Jason Fung, and it's amazing. Jason Fung, he takes heat from these calories in, calories out guys a lot, right? Because they go, oh, he says just calories don't matter. Well, that's not what he's saying, because these guys are trying to say fasting works because you're decreasing your caloric intake, which is true, but mostly we're looking at the metabolic effects, because I'll tell you, I have diabetics. If they fast, they normalize their sugars very, very quickly, right? Because
I know it's crazy. Just like
yeah,
the 16-8 schedule helps
yeah,
so much with normalizing sugars. And it's really not just about calories with the fasting too. And I've heard a lot of people, like I'm very active on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook with like all these social media profiles. And I get a lot of, I honestly get a lot of hate from people who are, fitness instructors and personal trainers and people who don't know too much about metabolic health, like how the body works, how insulin works, how glucose works. Like they don't know what ghrelin even is, the hunger hormone. And so they give me a lot of crap for saying that calories don't matter so much, which really I got that from Jason Fung and podcasts like yours. So I should just direct them to you instead of arguing back. But
well, it's a hard
it,
thing, and I think, and you made a good point on low carb MD, and I think this is an important topic too. Is once you got the blue check next to your name on Instagram, once you reach a certain level, then everyone wants to attack you all of a sudden. They allow you to get to a certain level, then they attack you and they say, look, what you're doing is not healthy. They actually canceled you for a little while, saying it's like, this is an um, unhealthy way to lose weight type thing, right?
right. Yeah, my Instagram, it's just at Kevin Gendro. My Instagram got a post got taken down and the account got suspended briefly because I posted a before and after picture and it was a very clear like weight loss picture. I think I was in scrubs, like I was in
Fully
triple X
clothed. Yeah, he
scrubs,
goes, I was fully
fully
clothed
clothed.
too, so it wasn't taken out for any other reason, right? Yeah.
And it was taken down for quote promoting unhealthy beauty standards, which I still don't get how
That's
it's
absolutely,
unhealthy.
it's incredible on these guys. I mean, it's incredible. And it's hard because it's almost like, I think a lot of times when people criticize, I find it quite humorous because people know I'm pretty easygoing about stuff. But sometimes on low carb MD, they go, he's a zealot. That's it. I go, you didn't listen to the podcast, obviously, because you hear what I say. I go, look, what works for that person in front of you? You want to be vegan? Cool. If it's working for you and you're emotionally stable and you can be healthier, cool. Can you reverse diabetes that way? Yes. There's a, can you be carnivore and do the same thing? Yes. I've seen it. So,
Right, there's a
and
wide spectrum of low carb and improving metabolic health, and it's hard
ultimately
to
our
believe that you
job,
could be like keto and vegan, but it is possible.
yeah, it's very, very challenging, very difficult. And you're probably going to be a grumpy person. Yeah, it's very difficult, but it can be done. If you have ethical reasons, right? We want to work with everyone. And I think that's what I love about your approach too. It's like, okay, what works for you? Let's figure out you. Because if you say, look, I have to have cookies twice, if that's your life and you're not diabetic and you're pretty metabolically healthy and you're okay with your weight, okay. I have some people, they eat way more carbs than others. It's just the way it is. But
Yeah.
when you look at the long term, you go, okay, how do I set myself up for the long term success? And guys like you and I, who we look at a cookie and we gain a couple pounds, and then you have to say, okay, I have to be more strict than the guy who, Sean Baker, he could get away with way more carbs than we can. He's all muscle, right, and
Yep.
no visceral fat. So yeah, it's a spectrum. And I think when you learn, you say, gosh, and the other thing that makes me nutty and is everyone says, well, it's too restrictive, it's too challenging, it's too difficult. Yeah, it works, but it's too hard. But it's like, well, it's not that hard if you really enjoy it and you like what you're eating and you get away from processed foods.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's just that mindset shift to like, this is not going to be temporary. This is how your body was built. And if you give it foods like processed carbohydrates or too many carbohydrates per day, then you will gain weight. And it's like it's like a hand of cards that you were dealt that's just unfortunate. But like, if you accept it as part of who you are, like the sooner you can accept that, the better off you'll be. And the sooner you can accept it as more of a permanent lifestyle change than just a crash diet, the better off you'll be. but I haven't found it that restrictive because I'm really never that hungry. I typically do, 18-6 ratios of fasting where I eat between 12 and 6 p.m., or I do 20-4 where I eat between like 4 and 8 p.m. or 2 and 6 p.m. So I'll eat in a 4-hour window or a 6-hour window most days. And I'm not really hungry outside of that window. And if I really am that hungry at 11 a.m., I'll just eat something. Like it's not a big deal.
Yeah,
Most
it's
of the
not a big
days I
deal,
do
right?
that. So
Yeah, that's it. Saying, okay, I'm hungry today, whatever reason, and then and analyze it a little bit and go, okay, am I just stressed? Is because someone said something mean to me and I want something? But having healthy snacks
right.
around is really a key to set yourself up and planning ahead. And there's so many things. I'm really excited about your book, getting it into my patients' hands. Why? Because it makes my job easier because they can get another perspective and reinforcement too. So yeah, that's why I love what you're doing and your story and everything. I love what you're doing. I'm excited for your patients because I know you're compassionate and kind and you understand the psychological component where you have to understand is like, hey, look, I'm in your corner. Let's take it a step at a time. We're gonna, the worst thing that can happen is someone like your dad gets a diagnosis of cancer. Go, do you have terminal cancer? And not saying, hey, look, here's our plan. We're gonna walk you through it. I'll be with you every step of the way. We're gonna figure this thing out. Let's take one thing at a time, rather than, because it's so overwhelming. And you get that diagnosis, it's so scary and so overwhelming. Obesity is the same thing because by the time they get to us, they've failed multiple times in their life. In their mind, they think nothing works. I can't do this. And you get that negative mindset. And it's very, when they have success, they're surprised. They're surprised they're not hungry. They say, I'm not really hungry. That's
Right.
kind of right. It's that weird thing. And now you're obesity medicine trained. So, and I would love to pick your brain a little bit since I have a free consult here. Is, a lot of these medications work by decreasing the appetite. Well, I'm finding that when people go low carb, they say, I'm not really hungry anymore. So why would I give them a drug to decrease appetite when they don't have an appetite? Right.
I do.
And
Yeah,
yeah.
it's true. I mean, I do prescribe medications for weight loss, and that is part of my, job. And my job description is like, I'm going to do what I can to help people lose weight without needing like a surgical intervention.
Are there
So,
some that you find really helpful? Like you say, gosh, these are my go-tos. Because I'm not anti-drug, but because some people really, really need it when they really are having that struggle with addiction and they're hungry all night and they can't. And I've seen very good success with that. So I'm not anti for sure. I prefer to do eat meds and hold your hand, do whatever I can to prevent surgery, if possible. But some people benefit from surgery too. It's not like they're all mutually exclusive. But I think shouldn't be the first resort.
right, exactly. I think it's somewhere around 20 to 25% of my patients are on a medication of some kind. But sometimes it's, me trying to treat and address their mental health, like they have depression, and I start them on a medication like Wellbutrin, where it can try, kind of help with some of the
Mhm.
cravings for sugar and carbs while also treating their depressive symptoms. And so medications like that, like technically I am the weight loss doctor and I did start them on that medication, but really it's so multifaceted that it's not just like, oh, they're taking a weight loss pill, like, phentermine, which is like specifically for weight loss. And so it's only about 20% of my patients that are on something for weight loss medication wise. And I do try to avoid it and, stick with lifestyle. Pretty much I do 40-minute visits for new patients and 20 minutes for follow-ups. And honestly, the majority of the first 40 minutes that we have together is all about nutrition and diet, because I want to know how this person's relationship with food developed over time. And I want to know what their motivation to lose weight looks like, what their day-to-day diet looks like, and what changes can be made that are like kind of easier swaps and things that are going to be more challenging for them, as well as things like, eating disorders in their past, because those things are important to know when you're like formulating a plan for a patient to help them lose weight. So yeah, the majority of the 40 minutes is all about that. And sometimes people are actually disappointed because they're like, what, like, I thought I was going to leave this first appointment with you with a pill to lose weight. And it's like, well, there's so much more to it than that. Like, if I could just throw a pill at this and you lose 50 pounds, it would be a whole other story, but that's not even an option.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that is the thing that we're missing. And unfortunately, in the standard of care, it's very difficult to spend that much time with a patient. And people, I know docs who understand the concept of insulin resistance, but they don't have, you have a 7-minute appointment, good luck, right? That's where
Right.
I love direct primary care because I have time with people and they're blown away. They say, you're calling me at night. You're, because I can. And so it's hard because the poor docs, they're overwhelmed and they're like, I'm not learning this crazy keto stuff. It's a fad. And, really, and that's the problem is they, they've had all the magic pills that Dr. Oz has talked about. It's like, hey, take this bark and you're going to lose weight. And none of those are like panning out for people. And so a lot of doctors are jaded, plus they're stressed and tense and worried and have lifestyle problems themselves. Trust me, I was there
And
for 18
like
years, sleep deprived and beat
primary,
up.
right?
Yeah.
You made it 18 years, right? I only made it 3 years doing primary care after residency before switching to
Yeah, I'm
weight loss
dumb. I'm
medicine.
slow, man. I'm slow. It takes me a while to catch on. I'd have Tro kicking me in the butt, and good people like Molly Rutherford, and a lot of them out there that have helped me. Said, Brian, what are you doing? You're killing yourself, and you can't. For me, it's frustrating when you're trying to. You can help that person, but they don't want to be helped necessarily. They're like, no, I'm not giving up these things. Well, then I can shoot you with insulin. That's my only other option. But now I
Oh, I know.
love it
And
because
it's
we're
like the
taking people
worst
off
thing.
meds every day, right?
It's the worst thing starting someone on insulin because you just know that they're going to gain weight and it's just going to worsen everything that they're going through. And so I totally much prefer taking people off. But I was just going to say, I think it's so interesting, the field of primary care and how, the way primary care doctors work these days. It's like you already have 15 minutes for the patient on your schedule, but then you have a medical assistant who has to room them. They may come 5 minutes late. By the time you get in the room, you literally have 5 minutes with them, 7 minutes with them. And you have to address their diabetes. You have to address their blood pressure problem. You have to talk about their back pain, their knees hurt, they're fatigued all the time. They have like 6 new complaints that they haven't mentioned before. And you can't even do that. Never mind get to the underlying cause for their diabetes and their high blood pressure and their fatty liver. So like, how could you possibly have time to talk about nutrition during a primary care visit? In primary care, I was making nutrition/weight loss visits separate from my regular follow-ups with patients. And I would just have like a visit just about that. And when they tried to bring up other stuff, I'd be like, we have to talk about your diet today because it's causing all these other problems.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing. People just don't realize that. And for me, on the other side of it, I was shocked because I started saying this person's diabetic or pre-diabetic, or let's start doing low carb. And then all of a sudden they say, my mood's better. I feel more happy. I'm sleeping better. I'm not as stressed. I feel like working out again. And all these things, I'm thinking, this is crazy. Like we weren't looking at that. We weren't treating those things. And we're stopping antidepressants and anxiety medicines and all this. Now this is pre-COVID, but it's just shocking when you see that. I was thinking, wow, this is pretty amazing. Then all these studies started coming out, like you had talked about with the addiction, and Joan Ifland, her work. And so when Tro and I talked about this on episode number 10 and number 13, we got lit up by the medical community saying these guys are nuts. I think this is helping everything. I'm like, it is though. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it.
I'm seeing it. People coming off of their SSRIs, people feeling but like just personally reporting anecdotally feeling much better mentally. And I think it genuinely does, low carb and intermittent fasting, particularly when combined, but maybe even just on their own, do improve mental health. People have, they're less depressed, they're less anxious. I have people with bipolar who are just doing better overall. And it's, not something where I've done my own study and have measured it in any way. Like I don't have like this randomized controlled trial going, but I just know anecdotally from my own patients that their mental health is improving. So, and thankfully there are other doctors who are doing things like that.
And we're seeing, as a matter of fact, right when I was starting this stuff, a good friend of mine in Guatemala, his wife, started having major depression, anxiety, all this stuff. And I said, well, I was going back, did they take away any medicines? Well, she was on metformin before and they stopped it right before this thing. I was like, it's interesting. Now, just this week or last week now, a study came out saying bipolar disorder gets better with metformin. Fibromyalgia, better with metformin. I mean, these things that you think, why would that be? This is a diabetes medicine. But then you realize it's lowering insulin levels. So are we.
Yep.
Right? So it's the mechanism is lowering insulin, and all these diabetes medicines that lower mortality rates, they're all lowering insulin. That's what they have in common. So when we say, let's lower insulin level, they say, well, these guys are quacks. We're doing the same thing that they're doing with the drug, and it's a bit cheaper with us, I think.
I know. At least my patients know the truth, like if I get any hate online, I'm like, whatever. Yesterday, I helped patients lose 140 pounds total. Like, I just have to look at my own patient population and be reassured that what I'm doing is working and changing lives.
Yeah, and that's it. And you look at the labs and you're happy, you're smiling to yourself going, wow, their A1C was 12.6. Now it's 6.2. I'll take it. Right? Are you kidding me?
It's crazy.
In less than 3 months, and that's ridiculous. So it's in the fives. You're like, we'll take it any day. I'll take the criticism. And that's what, we Tro and I had a meeting before we started the podcast. I go, Tro, because I reached out to him because I saw his story. And I said, we're going to take heat, right? It's like easier just to be quiet and do this in our little clinics and shut up, right? But there's doctors like you. There's great people out there who we can help and get you on the right path, or at least say, okay, let's look at it and see if it's crazy or not. That's why we made that podcast for doctors. And I want this to be more for people and talk about the other stuff, and this podcast, I want to get to, obviously we want to talk about your book too, for sure. But like, where do you go when everything sucks? When life's stressful, intense, and when you went through all that stuff, having your dad being sick, your sister passing away too, and like, so mentally, where did you go? What gave you peace? Did you do yoga? Did you throw rocks? What did you do to like center yourself or calm yourself?
So clearly what I did prior to losing all the weight was ate, because we know it affects, the serotonin and the dopamine in your brain. It's like taking, sugar is like taking a hit of a drug. And so it used to calm me down. I would have, binge eating episodes to the point of being sick to my stomach, but mentally I felt a little bit better. And so food was definitely my comfort, and food was my antidepressant. It was my anti-anxiety. It was like a medication for me. I feel like donuts and cookies were literally like my therapist. Not that I talked to them, but I just ate them and felt better. So I had to really reframe my like coping mechanisms and find things that were healthier. And so there's quite a few things. I mean, after my sister passed away, I decided to get a dog. And it was actually I got the exact dog that she told me to get, named him exactly what she told me to name him. His name's Teddy. And he got me out of bed every morning, and I had to walk him. It was like this thing that I had to be responsible, this like being that I had to be responsible for every day. And so even days where I really just wanted to lay in bed comatose, and, my sister was like my best friend, and I was so overwhelmed with her children having no mom. They were 6 and 2 when she passed away. So I just couldn't cope. I didn't know what to do. And so I really didn't want to turn back to food. So I, used the depression, the anxiety, and the sorrow that I had, and the anger, of course, that comes with losing a loved one, in a positive way to control what I was eating. And just found other ways to soothe my soul. There's actually a book called 50 Ways to Soothe Yourself. I don't know if you've heard of that, but
No,
it
I'm
goes
writing
through
it down,
like,
man.
yoga, green tea, going for walks, calling a friend, all the types of things you can do where you normally would go binge on food, but instead you pick one of these 50 things. And I would just pick up the book and flip to a random thing and try that instead of cookies.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
it helped a lot. And, starting to exercise did help a lot too. I don't attribute pretty much any of my weight loss to exercising, because I never really had like a specific exercise regimen where I was like, running with any frequency per week or anything like that. It was after I lost 125 pounds that I actually started running. And I started with like a couch to 5K program. I did a couch to 5K program with coworkers and began running, 10, 12-minute miles, and started doing 5Ks. And I would do them with my dog sometimes, so that would get him out of the house. And so I started running really after I lost the weight, but that has been phenomenal for my mental health. And now I usually run 15, sometimes 20 miles a week. And I think that really keeps me grounded. And I also continue going to my grief counselor, because grief's not something that just goes away. And, now it's been 4 years since my sister passed. It just was the 4-year anniversary recently. And I don't, in some ways, feel that much different than 4 years ago when it happened. It's not like there's an off switch 6 months later or 2 years later.
Yeah.
And so I still have to work on ways to cope. And I still want to keep myself grounded and keep myself away from those toxic behaviors and foods that I reached for in the past. And so it is a struggle all of the time. And usually when I say I had binge eating disorder, I just say, actually, I have it, because I do have an urge to do that sometimes. In primary care, letting a patient know that they have cancer is like the hardest thing that I have to do. And you have to do it way more often than I originally anticipated, like in medical school and in residency. It's like a lot of times the primary care doctor is one of the first ones to find something or learn something or let the patient know bad news of some kind. And so every time that happens, I need a way to cope, or I'm going to want to go back to my old ways of eating poorly.
Yeah, that's so critical. Substituting that, finding something else. So, I have someone who grabs a guitar. I have one lady who lost 18 pounds after she started knitting, right? She said knitting, and she's a psychiatrist. She said knitting for an hour. I don't worry about my kids, my husband, family. I don't watch the news. I focus on and I see progress, and I'm thinking, and it's just shut my brain down for an hour, and she's losing weight. And there's studies on that showing meditation and yoga and prayer, may work just as well as exercise for weight loss, right? Because it's that lowering those stress hormones down. And you may see the same thing as I do, but I see this, like you said, the middle-aged, stressed out, premenopausal, menopausal real estate agent who's stressed all the time, doesn't have time to prepare food, doesn't have time to exercise, doesn't
Her
that weighs
cortisol
themselves
levels are like
every
through
single
the
day.
roof,
Yeah.
like stressed always,
Yeah.
insulin
It's
levels
really,
beyond.
and when we talk about stress reduction, they look at me like I've, you know, two heads or something, because it's crazy. So like, what does stress have to do with them? Like, it has a lot to do with it. Trust me. Right. Because we all stress eat, we all stress, and when you're at peace, you say, well, I'm at peace. I don't really have to do drugs or alcohol or whatever it is to escape when you're at peace, because you're escaping stress usually and tension. And for me, my home was my place of peace always, right? The people behind me, right? But I was working 14-hour days, 16-hour days every day, and I'll miss dinners, miss everything, and it's like it takes a toll on you. It really does. It wasn't about the money. At some point you say, okay, what matters? I think when you start realizing what matters and what's important, it really helps refocus you. Because I think a lot of people are overstressed because they feel like they have to be the PTA parent, they have to do all this stuff, and they have to be involved with every committee, and then they don't have time at home, and they don't have time to just have peace. So my work was my stress, even though I love what I do. You know what I'm talking about, because you love what you do, you love that patient interaction, but then 3 hours of prior authorizations and writing your notes and all this stuff that you want to interact with people, and you're by yourself in your office and everyone else is out walking after
I
work or
know
whatever.
it would be different if there wasn't so much paperwork, I'm sure.
And I think that's part of it, that is the poor medical community. I see the animosity is a lot of it's because they're not happy with their job and they work their butts off. And I know how everyone, no matter if I agree with you or not, I know how much you sacrifice to do what you're doing. And at some point you sit there and say, what the heck am I doing here? Like, I have 7 minutes with a patient. I'm just part of the system. For me, as a matter of fact, one of the big deciding factors, one of the big HMO that I actually trained with the doctor, and he called me and goes, what the heck are you doing ordering all these insulins on people? Like, you're wasting our money. And I'm like, I'm saving you guys a ton of money because we're preventing diabetes before it happens. And his
Right.
answer basically was, hey, look, when people get diagnosed with diabetes, we get paid more money by the government. So you're actually hurting us by ordering that.
Oh my God.
You believe
Oh
that?
my
It's like,
God.
oh my gosh, that's when I go, okay, I'm done. I'll take a pay cut. I'm not dealing with this because,
I can believe that.
it's the craziness of stuff. You realize, like, what am I doing here? I can help people, but there's a lot of people I can't help. So now I'm cheating the system, and it sounds like you are too, because I have people who really want to make themselves healthier, and they seek me out for that. And I go, okay, we're on the same page. Let's do this thing, right? And I'll give you the tools, and you help me, and I help you. It's all good.
Right. Like, technically it might mean less money for the hospital system. Like, I try not to think about those things down the road or get into it too deeply with like administration and stuff like that. Like, yes, I'm going to be referring less because hopefully I reverse their diabetes. You know what I mean? Like, I'm hoping for such things. So I try not to think about the monetary aspects down the road. I just try to like make the person better. That's why I became a doctor, was I wanted to help people, and I wanted to do it in this like longitudinal way with a focus on prevention. And I thought that primary care was like my calling, and just realized through my own journey that actually weight loss is.
Yeah, so I think you go on your journey, you figure out what you love, where you have passion, and you're one of those fortunate docs. You can do what you love to do. You're seeing people happy. They're happy to see you. And like you said, you at the very beginning, you made a point that when you're really sick and you're really not doing well and you're not doing the right stuff, you don't want to go see your doctor, right? When you're really not living your life right, you don't want to go to church. If you're not stretching every day, you don't want to go to yoga, right? All those things that, like, we want to avoid it. And then we get into this whole, and I think that's the other thing, is the importance of community. Like, you have a great community. You're doing Instagram. I'm not a tech guy. I'm just stuck on Twitter and see all the nastiness. I should switch over to Instagram and join you. But it's one of those things where you start realizing you build a community. People say, oh, there's someone else who struggles with snacking after dinner. There's someone else who's losing a loved one. There's someone else who's having this problem. And I think when you realize you're not the only one on an island, that's why I think, a lot of us who were separated during COVID. Last night, I went out to dinner with my wife here in California. We were locked down forever. And to see the face of a waitress that I haven't seen, like, I've seen her a couple of times, but we never seen each other without a mask. And it was very nice. And we had such a nice interaction to like see someone. She goes, wow, it's really nice to see you finally, And you're like,
Yeah, it's
wow,
like
you
the
don't
simple
realize that
things.
there's a human connection that we miss.
Totally. Yeah, I think the pandemic really took a toll on a lot of people, particularly from a weight standpoint and a mental health standpoint. So it's interesting to see. And I think like I'm in such demand to be seen as a doctor, like we're booking, I think I'm booking in October, and it's because people put on so much weight during the pandemic and they want to get rid of it. Like, they're finally realizing that it's time to rid themselves of this excess weight. And I think it's kind of like it comes to a head at some point. And that's this now that the world is opening is when everything is coming to a head and people are realizing that they want to make real sustained changes.
Yeah, and you want to be metabolically healthier. And I think that's the thing we learned from COVID. That's who died. When we look at the numbers, we look at all that stuff, say, look, what can I do to make myself healthier, happier, better for my grandkids and great grandkids, be able to play, soccer with them or do things. And I think that's such an important thing that, I see. As a matter of fact, yesterday, one of my ladies, she had crippling arthritis in her knees, and now she says, my knees don't hurt at all. She's like so happy that she goes, I can do stuff. I don't. She said it's weird for me because I expect to have pain when I stand up, and there's no pain, and it's weird to me, right? And so that's so great to hear.
I know. People come to me, they actually get booked with me from their orthopedist, right? They'll be sent from their orthopedist. This patient needs to lose 15 pounds so that I can do their knee replacement. And then they lose 50 pounds and then they don't want a knee replacement anymore.
Yeah, I know that happens. I'm telling you,
blood pressure is better.
yeah. Ben Bickman and I have talked about that. That's just, it happens and you go, wow, that's amazing. So doctor's like, I'm not sending, but on that note, there's a lot of people, the orthopedic surgery, they can't do surgery because people are metabolically so sick, they'll die on the table or they'll get an infection and have these problems. So it's like, yeah, send them to me. I'll be happy to help you, and send them back in 6 weeks, and you're going to have a healthy patient that can get through surgery. Okay. And that's an important topic because obesity plays such a role in metabolic disease. So I know we're coming to an end, man. This hour went by way too fast for me.
I know. I can't believe it.
I definitely want to, like, I want to know, like, what's life's best medicine for you? What do you say? Like, what's words of wisdom that you learned, something along the way in med school, or something that dad said or your sister said, or, that impacted you that you think you would love to share with people?
So interesting question. So the name of this book that is coming out today is called Fasting While Furious: How I Turned Anger and Sadness into Motivation for Weight Loss. That's the title of the book. But what's most interesting, that is like the flashy title, Fasting While Furious, right? Like people want to know how I was so angry and so sad and how I turned it into motivation for weight loss. But at the end of the day, what life's best medicine was for me, what truly drove my weight loss journey, was love. It was the love for my niece and nephew, and everything that I did when it came to this whole weight loss journey was how much love I had for my sister, how much I care about and love those kids, and how I just wanted to be at my best and at my healthiest to help take care of them in the event that something happened to her. So superficially, it seems like it's just anger and sadness, and that's what drove everything to happen, but it really was the love of my family.
That's awesome, man. That's what it's about. Loving people, loving your family, being able to show that love. I mean, that's all. I got goosebumps while you're talking, because I think that's so important, because yeah, the anger and the fury it works for the title of the book too. But sometimes you need to get mad and say, look, I've had it. I'm doing something about this. I'm going to make these changes. And you get that when I see that fire in someone's belly, I love it. When they go, that's it. Tell me what to do. I'm in. Yep. It's so much, that makes such an impact. And then, thinking about saying, yeah, I would love to be able to impact the world better and help my neighbor. I would love to help my family be healthier. And, and we see that spreading, and it's so awesome. Like, I'm taking care of some Latina ladies up in Northern California, and it's spreading to their whole family. Their husband's coming off medicines, and their whole family, they're not my patient, but they say, hey, look, here's how we're going to eat. We're all going to eat this way now. And it's amazing when you see that. You go, wow, this is so cool that we're impacting people that we're never, ever going to meet or talk to. Right.
I love when that happens. I call them happy accidents. It's like, I can't believe it, but people will have like one of the visits, it's just them. And then the next visit, they're there with their husband. And the next visit, it's their husband and their teenage daughter. And then before you know it, they're like, oh yeah, my husband did lose 75 pounds doing this, like just casually. I'm like, oh, I don't know what any of his metabolic health looks like, but I bet he's way better off now,
Yeah, I wish we had the numbers. I know I always say, gosh darn, I wish we had the numbers before they started, but we'll take it. So yeah, it's awesome, man. Keep up the good work, and it's such a blessing to have you on. I think it's such a important topic. So everyone go out and buy the book. We'll put a link to it on the website. Fasting While Furious. Love it, man. Love it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for joining me on short notice. When you tweeted, I know you're not on Twitter as much, but once you tweeted, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to have him on. Then you're like, okay, let's do it tomorrow. Okay, cool. So I think this is such an important topic, and I think I think this transfers over to low carb MD and here Life's Best Medicine, because it all goes together. What you're saying is so important on so many aspects, from the medical aspects, from the from the feeling aspects, the psychological aspects of all this stuff. And you've been through it and you've seen it, and you've seen the disaster stories and you've seen the success stories. And I think, it's such a valuable tool. So I'm going to have this in my office for sure. This will be a mandatory read for my patients. It'll be on my list. I know it already. I haven't read it, but I know you.
I know you know the whole story.
I know the whole story now. Yeah, heck, I don't have to buy, but I'm going to have it here
because
I think people need to hear it.
There's like a sample meal plan, a 7-day meal plan in there that's all based on a low carb, less than 40 grams of carbs per day diet. And there's like a few recipes that I really like and a getting started guide.
Awesome, man. So, what a great tool. I'm excited. I can't believe I didn't hear about this coming out. So I'm glad you said something and joined me. So everyone, go grab the book. I'll have it. If you want to join me, come to my office and I'll give you a loaner copy. But I want you to buy it. It's worth it. These guys work so darn hard. I haven't written the book yet. One of these days, maybe.
I'll talk about
different weird stuff. But, I might steal some of your chapters. But anyways, I think it's really awesome. So everyone get out there, take a listen. Thanks for joining us. And remember, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. And hey, if you have to be furious to start, but end in love, right? And love yourself. Not that you have to be arrogant and narcissistic, but love yourself enough to say, hey, I'm going to make a change. I love myself today, but I'm going to be a little bit better tomorrow, a little bit better the next day. And one step at a time. I have people losing 200 pounds one step at a time and not giving up and not getting frustrated. So stay the course, be kind, have a great week. And Doc, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life.